What's up, guys? If you're new to this channel, let me tell you how things work here. I am a lawyer in Central Minnesota, and I like to see what's going on in the law and help break down legal documents for people to kind of determine or help them kind of determine what's in the news, what's happening, what might be important to them or not. And today we have a doozy. This is the beginning of a series that I'm going to do, and this is James Damore versus Google in a class action lawsuit. James Damore, if you don't remember, was the Google employee, a software engineer, I believe, who went ahead and he wrote what was later deemed a manifesto that started a firestorm online and in the news media. I believe he was let go from Google following this manifesto, which people believed was him discriminating unfairly against genders. Well, in a twist of fate, this is his lawsuit against Google for discriminating against him, partly on the basis of his gender, partly on the basis of his race, and I believe partly on the basis of his political viewpoints. So, what we're going to do, and again, this will be a multi-part series, and these videos will probably be pretty long. Today, in this video, I'm going to start reading through the document. And yeah, I actually do, if you're not aware, I actually do read through most every line of these documents. Now, if you're looking up here at the pages, you'll see there are 161. We are not going through all 161 pages today. The complaint itself is not, I don't believe it's even half that. And the rest of that is exhibits and evidence that they are including in this suit. We will go through them, but not in this video. This video is going to be limited probably to the facts section, and then some of the, probably the facts section. I mean, we'll see where we go, but I think I'm going to do causes of action in the next video. That'd be the hope. But the facts are going to help us lay the groundwork of the case, and if you are a judge or a clerk and you're getting this file, the first thing you got to do is read through the facts section. You got to find out what each party is alleging is going on before you can start weighing the merits of the causes of action. Okay, so we're gonna do that, and the final element of this channel is I do this while drinking either scotch or whiskey of some sort. Tonight, I will be drinking bourbon from this. This is from the 45th Parallel Distillery in Wisconsin. It is quite delicious, and we'll see how this goes. I may switch drinks halfway through, may not. Drop in the comments if you have a particular whiskey or scotch that you like to drink while reading lawsuit documents, and maybe at some point I'll grab a bottle. But for now, let's dig into this. If you're privy to any of my other videos, I have covered an insane lawsuit that was poorly written by either a joke of a lawyer, or it was written by the client and the lawyer was just paid to submit the documents and probably still shouldn't have. I don't know if this document is going to be juicy in the same way in its incompetence. I doubt it. I think we've got some competent attorneys in this, although I don't know them. I don't know any of these people. Let me be upfront with that too. I have no idea about these parties personally. My experience with Google is about the same as anyone else's. I use it for search on occasion. My channel is hosted on YouTube here, which is a Google company subsidiary. So, I mean, I have no vested interest in the outcome of this, just personal curiosity. And I'm really interested to see where this goes. So I don't know if they have competent attorneys or not. I would hope if you're going to take on one of the largest companies in the world that you find someone who's good at their job and takes it seriously, and you probably put some money into it. So that's the assumption I'm going to be basing this off of. Next, let me clarify that I am not versed in California law, and as any specific California statutes come up, I will attempt to do research on them. Although this video is a fairly virgin read through of this document. I have glanced over it. I have read maybe the first page, and beyond that, I have not. And I like to take these things kind of head on, as if I'm a new person reading this. So this will be exciting to me as we get into these causes of action. These are listed here, by the way. These 10 causes of action will be later on in the document. And we'll go through them, and I will, in that video, which will not be this video, I will include relevant law and decisions and talk about how these determinations are made. And hopefully, if the document is well drafted, we can match the facts to the causes of action and see what kind of merit they have based on just our understanding of the law or my understanding of the law, and you can make your own decisions too. If you think I'm wrong, call me an idiot by all means. Just a guy on the internet. I'm not talking about having special expertise in California law. I am a lawyer, like I said, and so I have some ability to translate this, but I'm not licensed in California, and I don't pretend to be. So if you are, man, I'd love your input on this, and tell me where I'm right, tell me where I'm wrong. Go ahead. I think this is just going to be really interesting. So here we go. First thing, James Damore and David Goodman, individually and on behalf of all others similarly situated. So this is similarly situated. So this is a class action lawsuit. They're filing Google LLC, which is a Delaware limited liability company, and Doe's 1 through 10. Think John Doe's. So some anonymous people 1 through 10. I'm not sure why they're anonymously listed. Maybe Damore and Goodman don't know specifically who these people are, or maybe they're protected for some other reason. We'll see if we find out in the document. And then the 10 complaints, the 10 causes of actions are violations of California Labor Code, Section 1101, 1102, workplace discrimination on the basis of gender and or race in violation of FEHA, which is the Fair Employment and Housing Act, workplace harassment in violation of the Fair Employment and Housing Act, retaliation in violation of the Fair Employment and Housing Act, retaliation in violation of public policy, retaliation in violation of California Labor Code 1102.5, failure to prevent harassment, discrimination, and retaliation, unfair business practices, business and professional code section 17,200 at sequentia. I don't remember the Latin phrase for this abbreviation, but it means and the parts that follow from 17,200, like 17,201, 17,202, and all of the subsections. That's what et sec means, and declaratory relief. So they have demanded a jury trial. We'll see if they get there. A brief point about complaints, because some people don't understand what the purpose of a complaint is. The purpose of a complaint is to survive summary judgment. Survive dismissal, survive summary judgment, and get you to, or win summary judgment, right? But ultimately not be dismissed or thrown out. So your job in a complaint is to either lay out legally why your case is ironclad from the onset on the face of the document, read in a way most favorable to the other party. That's how you win on summary judgment. Or to show that there is enough dispute over genuine facts that a trial is necessary, because then you have to have a judge or a jury as fact finder, call witnesses and determine who's telling the true story. They got to get both sides. If both sides agree on all the facts, right, and there's harmony there, which happens probably more than you'd suspect, if both sides agree on all the facts and they just have disagreements over the application of law, that's when we get into summary judgment or dismissal territory, when a judge comes in and says, no, this is the proper application of law, or this is the proper application of law, and sides with one or the other. So your job when you're drafting one of these documents is to survive dismissal and summary judgment from the defense. That's the whole purpose of it. It's to get you to discovery and then ultimately get you to trial. So we'll see, time will tell if this happens, if this document is good enough. But let's go. James Damore and David Goodman, together plaintiffs, through their attorneys, Dillon Law Group Incorporated, filed this complaint against Google LLC, a Delaware limited liability company, and Doe's 1 through 10, Google and Doe's collectively defendants. Upon personal knowledge, or if so indicated upon information and belief, plaintiffs allege as follows. So this is just when you make a complaint, your complaint is made under oath. So everything you say in it has to be true to the best of your knowledge. So going ahead and throwing in this first little line says, this is true to the best of what we know and believe. If it's wrong, it's because it's wrong, not because we're lying. And that's, that can be an important disclaimer. It doesn't get you out of a gross lie, but it's a nice little thing to throw in at the beginning. All right, case summary. Plaintiffs bring this individual and class action on behalf of themselves and on behalf of a class and subclasses defined as all employees of Google discriminated against, 1, due to their perceived conservative political views by Google in California at any time during the period beginning 4 years prior to the filing of this complaint through the date of trial in this action, the political class period. 2, due to their male gender by Google in California at any time during the time period beginning 1 year prior to the filing of this complaint through the date of trial in this action, gender class period, and or 3, due to their Caucasian race by Google in California at any time during the time period beginning 1 year prior to the filing of this complaint through the date of the trial in this action, race class period. Political class period, gender class period, and race class period referred to collectively as class periods. Okay, so, they're filing on behalf of anyone in any one of these subgroups or anyone in all, any combination or all of the subgroups. These violations also subject Google to claims for violation of California's Business and Professional Codes, Section 1007-200 et sec. And there's a footnote here which says, in addition, plaintiffs intend to assert claims under the Private Attorney General Act of California when those claims are perfected. So, throughout the class periods and in violation of California law, Google employees who expressed views deviating from the majority view at Google on political subjects raised in the workplace and relevant to Google's employment policies and its business, such as, quote, diversity hiring policies, quote, bias sensitivity, or, quote, social justice, were/are singled out, mistreated, and systematically punished and terminated from Google in violation of their legal rights. And if anyone is surprised by this, I guess be surprised by that, not know that this is going on. To me, this is less a question of whether this is going on and more a question of whether this is legal or not. We see many, many large corporations, skewing a certain way in how they implement policy. With Google, there's several allegations of being specifically targeting and silencing people of certain political perspectives on YouTube or other platforms. We see this also with Facebook and Twitter. And yes, we do have coverage of the Milo Yiannopoulos and Roger Stone suit against Twitter as those documents are available. I'll try and cover that on this channel as well. There's a sort of sniffing a sea change in how these massive social media companies are being, are going to be handled by their employees and their consumers. For the past several years, people of a more left-wing political perspective, to be quite frank, have had sway over these companies and have had influence on them both internally and externally. And now we're starting to see members of the right-leaning political perspective fight back. And they're doing it through the courts. They're doing it through the market. And let's see what happens. Paragraph 4, Google's open hostility. Google's open hostility for conservatives for conservative thought is paired with invidious discrimination on the basis of race and gender barred by law. Google's management goes to extreme and illegal lengths to encourage hiring managers to take protected categories such as race and or gender into consideration as determinative hiring factors to the detriment of Caucasian and male employees and potential employees at Google. So what they're saying is Google is attempting to meet a certain standard of demographic within their hiring population, and that's not facially illegal, but to do so in certain ways and to the specific detriment of a different racial or gender classification may run afoul of California's equal employment laws. Damore, Goodman, and other class members were ostracized, belittled, and punished for their heterodox political views, and for the added sin of their birth circumstances of being Caucasians and or males. Some complaints are dry and some complaints are not, and we'll see. As what's funny is, I bet as this document goes on, they start to get a little more fiery. As the lawyer drafting it, or the paralegal, whoever drafted it, but I assume in a case this big, it was probably drafted by a lawyer. Or maybe even a couple of them. As they go on through this and as they get tired and as their internal editor starts to get tired, I bet it gets a little more fiery. So that's could be fun. This is the essence of discrimination. Google formed opinions about and then treated plaintiffs not based on their individual merits, but rather on their membership in groups with assumed characteristics. No, Google. Google employees and managers strongly prefer to hear the same orthodox opinions regurgitated repeatedly, producing an ideological echo chamber, a protected, distorted bubble of groupthink. When plaintiffs challenged Google's illegal employment practices, they were openly threatened and subjected to harassment and retaliation from Google. Google created an environment of protecting employees who harassed individuals who spoke out against Google's view or the Googley way. That is not okay. That should be an 11th cause of action right there, as it is sometimes known internally. Ugh. Google employees knew they could harass plaintiffs with impunity given the tone set by managers, and they did so. Google employs illegal hiring quotas to fill its desired percentages of women and favorable minority candidates, and openly shames managers of business units who fail to meet their quotas. In the process, openly denigrating male and Caucasian employees as less favored than others. You can't do this, right? You can have goals for women and minority hires. You can do that. Lots of companies do that, and they have various ways in which they, go through and promote it. But what you cannot do, typically, is use race and gender as a factor in hiring. It's the, I don't know what it's called. Is it the A-B test? Where if you swap A and B, and a statement becomes offensive, then the original statement is offensive. If I say, if it's wrong to say that all black people do X, but you say all white people do X, if you switch black with white and it becomes offensive, then it was probably offensive in the initial point. I'm probably not explaining that well, but you get my drift, right? Like if you reverse genders or races or swap something out and it's suddenly offensive, it was offensive in the beginning as far as like the law is concerned when we're looking at this thing without bias. And yeah, I know you can add in a bunch of history and historical applications and why context might matter, but when it comes to discriminating against people on their race under the law, you just can't, right? The way the law is written typically provides that you can't do it, no matter what the race is, even if you believe that one race has some sort of privilege over another. You don't get to just eschew race law based on that. So we'll see. Not only was the numerical presence of women celebrated at Google solely due to their gender, which is offensive to women, I would think, but the presence of Caucasians and males was mocked, were mocked with boos during company-wide weekly meetings. This unacceptable behavior occurred at the hands of high-level managers at Google who were responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of hiring and firing decisions during the class periods. And I mean, put yourself in the shoes of an employee, right? You get on to a meeting and they talk about, 78% of our workforce is white. Boo! Like, how does that make you feel if you're white? I mean, if they had done it to Asians, for example, 25% of our workforce is Asians. And I know these aren't correct statistics. I don't know what they are, right? And then people boo. That would not be okay. Doesn't make it okay if one is in the majority, and I don't even know if white males are in the majority at Google. Plaintiffs bring this action to vindicate their legal rights and to stop Google from repeating these practices against other employees or prospective employees now and in the future. The parties. Damore is an individual who, at all times relevant to the complaint, worked in Mountain View, California for Google as a senior software engineer, a software engineer, and an intern. Damore was an employee of Google from 2013 until his wrongful termination on August 7th, 2017. So yeah, Google did fire him. Goodman is an individual, I hope I'm saying that right. Buddy, if you're out there, correct me. Who at all times relevant to the complaint worked in Mountain View, California for Google as a software engineer. Goodman was an employee of Google until his wrongful termination. Goodman worked for Google from 2013 to December 2016. Google is a corporation that, at all times relevant to the complaint, was incorporated under the laws of the state of Delaware, with its principal place of business in Santa Clara County, California. Google is registered with the California Secretary of State for the purpose of transacting business in California, and Google is a direct employer of the named plaintiffs. Okay, so they're trying to set up something important here. Both these guys worked in Mountain View. They weren't remote employees somewhere else. They were in Mountain View at Google headquarters. Google is incorporated under the laws of the state of Delaware, so they're under the jurisdiction of the Delaware courts, but their home office and principal place of business is Santa Clara County, California, and because of that, Google is also under the jurisdiction of California courts automatically. So, as we will see in just a second, they're overcoming a potential claim against, the validity of jurisdiction. But jurisdiction is not at issue in this case. They're simply stating it as a matter of course for the complaint. But, some cases are lost on jurisdictional grounds, so it's important to lay it out there. And it's also an important thing to show that you've done the research. Google, again, being a giant company with a giant headquarters, not really in question. Upon information and belief, plaintiffs allege that does 1 through 10 are the partners, agents, owners, shareholders, managers, or employees of defendants and are, or at relevant time were, acting on their behalf. Plaintiffs are unaware of the true names or capacities of the defendants sued herein under the fictitious names does 1 through 10, but prays for leave to amend and serve such fictitiously named defendants once their names and capacities become known. So what they're asking for here is, assuming we get past summary judgment and dismissal, we go to discovery, we find out who these guys are through all of the documentation that will be out there, and we will name and serve every single one of them at that point, but we do not have the opportunity to find the information out at this point, right? We don't have access to the company. These guys have been fired. They don't have access to the company records. They don't know what the internal management structure and maybe unnamed shareholders who are not public officers of Google. They don't necessarily know who is in charge of it, but once they do discovery, they'll find out and they'll go through the appropriate process at that time. Jurisdiction and venue. This court has jurisdiction over this action pursuant to California Constitution, Article 6, Section 10, which grants a superior court original jurisdiction in all causes except those given by statute to other courts. So they have original jurisdiction because this is a business within the state of California, and all the parties listed herein, as far as the plaintiffs know, are within the state of California. This court has jurisdiction over all defendants because upon information and belief, each defendant is either a citizen of California or has sufficient minimum contacts in California, or otherwise internally avails himself or itself of the California market so as to render the exercise of jurisdiction over it or him by the California courts consistent with traditional notions of fair play and substantial justice. So they're doing here is they're invoking the international shoe test, which says that you have to have sufficient minimum contacts within a forum state to be under the jurisdiction of the forum state. And in this case, they're saying that, Google is in California, but does 1 through 10, they believe that they're either in California, or if they're not, that they do sufficient business in California, specifically being a partner at Google whose main office is in California and presumably traveling there for business quite frequently. or expecting that they would, be able to sue under California law. That's what personally availing himself of the California market, right? If they're traveling in to go to work, right, they're using California roads, they're shopping at California stores, and they're expecting to be under the protection of California police and fire and all that stuff. So they're saying that that's what gives the court jurisdiction if they don't happen to be residents and citizens of California, which, again, they've already stated they don't even know who these guys are or ladies. And so they can't know for sure, but they have enough belief to make it a comfortable claim, and it's reasonable, right? Venue is proper in this court because upon information and belief, Google resides, transacts business, and or has offices in the county of Santa Clara, and most of the unlawful practices, acts, and omissions alleged herein took place in the county of Santa Clara. Exhaustion of administrative remedies. So this section is specific to employment actions taken within California state courts under the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, under that Fair Employment Housing Act that I mentioned earlier. So on November 30th, 2017, Damore filed an administrative complaint against Google with the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing and was issued a right to sue letter. So you make your complaint, you lay out a bunch of allegations, and then the department determines whether you should be able to proceed with a lawsuit or not. They're not going to be making deep legal claims, but if you're just like, they stole my iPod or whatever, right? They're not going to look at this as an employment thing. They're going to see if you have an employment discrimination suit that falls within the law of California. And if you do, based on what you put on the form and reading it in a way favorable to you, if you have that, they're going to issue that right to sue letter. And at that point, you're allowed to bring suit under these laws in California state court. If you're going to sue under federal equal employment opportunity, the EEOA, the Equal Opportunity Act, right? You don't do this administrative process. This is just for the California state courts. Goodman did the same thing. Damore and Goodman exhausted the necessary administrative remedies by filing the above referenced charges of discrimination with the department and obtaining right to sue letters. So, there's our introduction. Here's how we got to here. Next, I guess we'll just start into the factual allegations. This is where the plaintiffs are going to lay out who they are, what their work was like with Google, and what happened, right? And importantly, this is their side of the story. Google is logically going to have a different version of these facts, and that'll be an interesting read as well, because if we find out that Google had determined they should be terminated for reasons other than being white males, Google's going to have that on file, and then it'll be a battle of the facts and a battle of what their actual motivation is, because sometimes people come up with mitigating factors that aren't actually the reason for a hiring or firing decision, but in retrospect, they could have been a reason for hiring or firing, so they use that. That's not okay. Damore received his Bachelor of Science degree in molecular biology, physics, and chemistry from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He then earned his Master of Science in systems biology from Harvard University. Well-educated dude. Good job. Damore first began working for Google as a Harvard student in or around the summer of 2013. As a PhD software intern, by around December 2013, Google converted this internship into a full-time position, hired Damore as a software engineer. Damore worked on the team that was responsible for indexing and serving Google's search results for users. Damore was diligent and loyal, and received substantial praise for the quality of his work. He received the highest possible rating twice, including in his most recent performance review, and consistently received high performance ratings, placing him in the top few percentile of Google employees. Throughout the course of his employment with Google, Damore received approximately 8 performance bonuses, the most recent of which was 20% of his annual salary. Damore also received stock bonuses from Google amounting to approximately $150,000 per year. Sweet to work for Google, right? Just his stock bonuses are $150K a year. Good job, dude. Damore was never disciplined or suspended during his entire tenure at Google. Based on Damore's excellent work, he was promoted to senior software engineer in or around January 2017, just 8 months before his unlawful termination. So, a brief aside. saying something is an unlawful termination is what we call a legal conclusion. And when the court reviews this complaint to determine if there are enough facts alleged to bring a cause of action to survive summary judgment or dismissal, what they're going to look at is everything, but they're going to ignore any statement like this that is a legal conclusion. You can show how the termination was unlawful, and I'm assuming we'll get there, but you can't just state it was unlawful. I mean, you can, right? And you're trying to influence a judge, and you're trying to influence the clerk who's reading this, and you're trying to build a narrative for your case from the onset. But just as a point of order, these legal conclusory statements do not, they will not matter in summary judgment. They'll actually be ignored. So, they'll read it as, based on his excellent work, he was promoted to senior software engineer in or around January 2017. They'll probably just ignore this last part of the phrase to make it easy. Now, can you really ignore things forever? I don't think so. But whatever. Damore did not have any direct reports, did not supervise employees, did not assign work to other employees, and was not an integral or crucial part of the hiring or firing process at Google. He was not allowed to discipline employees. He's not a manager, right? He's just a talented software engineer, and he worked under someone else. No one worked under him. A cheesy dad joke, but I guess Google worked over him, right? Worked him over? Oh, that failed. Sorry. You'll have to deal with this. These documents, they get long. I get it. Damore's immediate supervisor was Christian Tapis, also known as Tapis. I don't know why there's not an H in Christian. I've never seen it spelled that way, but cool. Tapis reports to Chuck Wu, Senior Director of Engineering for Google. Wu, in turn, reports to Ari Balo, probably massacring some of these pronunciations, but that's how it's going to be. Vice President of Engineering. Below reports to Sridhar Ramaswamy, the Senior Vice President of GPI and Ads. Ramaswamy in turn reports to Sundar Pichai? I don't know, man. Who ultimately reports to Larry Page, CEO of Alphabet. Google shamed teams lacking female parity at TGIF meetings. On March 30th, 2017, Damore attended a weekly company-wide meeting called the TGIF meetings. These weekly meetings were used as an avenue for employees to connect and discuss certain topics involving Google. I'm guessing it happened on Fridays? Just a hunch? Was March 30th a Friday? I don't know. TGIF meeting on March 30th was entitled Women's History Month, and Google brought in two presenters for this get-together. Ruth Porat, the Chief Financial Officer of Google, and Eileen Naughton, the Human Resources Director of Google. During the March 30, 2017 TGIF meeting, either Porat or Naughton pointed out and shamed individual departments at Google in which women comprised less than 50% of the workforce. If you're the HR director, you'd think you would find a way to make that better, but who knows? Alternatively, they applaud and praise departments such as the sales department where women comprise more than 50% of the workforce, which doesn't seem equal, right? It should be exactly 50%, I would think. During the event, Porat and Naughton also discussed that when looking at groups of people for promotions and for leadership opportunities on new projects, Google would be taking into account gender and ethnic demographics. And I don't know about you, but when I worked for large corporations, they were open about this, and it's stunning to me. They're open about this as long as they're not looking to promote specifically white males. Before I became a lawyer and before I was independent of any hiring position, I worked for a couple large corporations, and both of them, almost all of my superiors were female, and almost all of the people promoted to superior positions during my tenure at both of these large companies were female as well. And it was pretty clear that if you were not female or of some sort of, ethnic demographic, as it's laid out here, which I don't know what that even actually means, but if you were not female or part of an ethnic demographic, then the likelihood of you being promoted was low. You looked at it's sort of a lateral transfer in these firms, and they're open about it. I mean, right in their company handbooks and open company discussions. So, but that may be in violation of the law. That people do things that break the law all the time. Companies are no exception. They then mentioned that Google's racial and gender preferences in hiring were not up for debate because this was morally and economically the best thing to do for Google. Well, I mean, that settles it then. If you say something is the right answer, then why would you debate on it? Damore was surprised by Google's position on blatantly taking gender into consideration during the hiring and promotional processes, as he probably should be, and in publicly shaming Google business units for failing to achieve numerical gender parity. Damore believed that blatant gender preferences and quotas were inconsistent with U.S. and California discrimination laws. This TGIF meeting was one of the factors that led to Damore attending Google's Diversity Inclusion Summit. So here's the summit. In or about June 2017. This is getting up to the time when he published his paper and everything went right into the gutter. Damore attended a Diversity and Inclusion Summit conducted by Google at the Mountain View campus. Approximately 100 employees attended this event. Damore felt pressured to attend the event because Google proclaims, quote, commitment to diversity and inclusion, end quote, to be an important factor in deciding promotion to leadership positions. Due to his excellent work performance, Damore was on the path to leadership position at Google before his abrupt termination. So, right, like, if you happen to, as they put it, have commit the sin of being born a white male, you better toe the line without question of diversity inclusion within Google to even have a prayer of being promoted beyond where you are. That's the message that he got, and assuming the facts to be true, I can see why. But we don't know if these facts are definitely true. Let's bear that in mind, being as impartial as possible. But we'll see what happens after this next drink. The summit was organized by Google's senior vice presidents and other members of Google's leadership team, including Below and Ramaswamy. Employees were allowed to ask questions, and there were also breakout groups for subsequent conversations. The summit covered general topics such as how Google could increase its diversity. Specifically, the Google presenters went through some of their policies that were designed to accomplish this, such as treating preferred categories of people, women, certain but not all ethnic minority groups. I wonder which ethnic minority groups were left out. And that's interesting too, because if you have, like, let's say you prefer everybody except white people, you at least then would have some sort of like colonialism or imperialist sort of claim and say that, white privilege has allowed these people enough opportunities and we need to overcome that privilege as a matter of course in our hiring and promotion process. Like, at least you've got an argument. But if you leave out someone else, a different ethnic minority group, and they don't say which one, I have an idea of who I think it might be, but, I don't know for sure. Treating these people differently during the hiring process by providing extra interviews and putting applicants into a more welcoming environment based on their race or gender. This is overt discrimination, and if true, could be very bad. The Google presenters also discussed putting diverse individuals into high priority queues so they were more likely to be hired and hired faster. Google defined diverse individuals as women or individuals who are not Caucasian or Asian. Oh, it turns out I was right. So Caucasians and Asians on the chopping block. Typically, in the software field, I believe, I'm not an expert, right? But I believe Caucasians and Asians overrepresent their respective demographics and tend to be high performers due to the overrepresentation, right? If you've got 40 white people to hire, you might get a better candidate than if you had 5 Hispanic people to hire. I don't know. Like, it's not a guarantee, right? But that's the thinking. So Caucasians and Asians, at least stereotypically, dominate the engineering and software markets. So they're looking to push those numbers down and other numbers up. At the summit, Damore spoke with Meghana Rao from Google's Human Resources Department. Damore told Rao that he believed some of the positions taken by Google were divisive and misguided. Specifically, Damore mentioned that it seemed like Google was elevating political correctness over merit. And if you're a high-achieving guy, like Damore claims to be in this complaint, like, that makes sense, right? You're concerned that, hey, I'm working really hard here. What if my work isn't going to be recognized because of my skin color? And I think anyone should take umbrage with the idea that their work would not be recognized because of their skin color, right? Like, that's what we've been fighting for a long time now. Rao responded to Damore's comment by stating, quote, some of the political things at Google were a problem. They discussed how some Google employees with conservative views and values did not feel included, and Rao mentioned how she and other HR representatives had received similar complaints from the past from employees with conservative views. While at the summit, Damore participated in breakout group sessions with other employees. There he asked questions about whether Google looked at viewpoint diversity with respect to hiring decisions and evaluating how inclusive Google was as a workplace. The answer he received was that Google only looked at demographic diversity, gender, and or race when making hiring and promotion decisions, not at viewpoint diversity. And if that's true, that undermines his conservative viewpoint claim, right? So we'll see. I don't know. This is just, he's relaying the facts of what they said, not what it was. At the end of the program, the Google presenters specifically asked employee attendees to give written feedback on the program. This prompted Damore to draft a memorandum entitled Google's Ideological Echo Chamber. It should say this prompted Damore to draft a resignation letter entitled Google's Ideological Echo Chamber, right? Because that's, I mean, you know. On or about the end of June 2017, after Google asked for feedback on the contents of the summit, Damore spoke with different Google employees about the issues they felt were not evenly covered at the summit, and drafted a memorandum based on those conversations. Multiple employees made suggestions and provided feedback, and this memo was edited multiple times. Damore named this memo Go/PC Considered Harmful, using Google's own naming conventions. A copy of the final version of this memo with all the edits incorporated is attached as Exhibit A. And like I said, the exhibits we will go through in a future video. And in those future videos, I plan, especially with the exhibits and stuff, I plan to do live streams because they'll be after the facts and causes of actions. And I plan to have chat available with Q&A involved. So if you get questions in this, certainly throw them in the comments. If they're quick, I may answer them. I love to interact with people in the comments, and I may answer if I know them and they're quick. If they're longer questions, or if they deserve a longer answer, you know, absolutely bring them to the live chat. That could be a lot of fun. Damore observes in the memo that Google employees and management focus greatly on alleged unconscious racial and gender bias, but neglect political orientation, which is actually a result of deep moral bias. That's bourbon. Bourbon down. I'm going to switch, actually. I'm going to go with this Lagavulin 16. Which is, gosh, it's close to my favorite scotch. If it's not my favorite, I'm not sure what is, but it's really good. And I am sinfully low on this stuff, so I guess a new bottle of something is in order soon. But we'll see. Damore specifically stated in the memo that his purpose for writing the memo was to promote discussion among Google employees regarding the, quote, diversity and inclusion issues covered in the summit. He wrote, quote, open and honest discussion with those who disagree can highlight our blind spots and help us grow, which is why I wrote this document. Damore further stated, quote, of course, I may be biased and only see evidence that supports my viewpoint. In terms of political biases, I consider myself a classical liberal and strongly value individualism and reason. By the way, based on that description, I would hesitate to call him conservative. I'd be very happy to discuss any of the document further and to provide more citations. Although maybe he is. Maybe he is. I don't know. The memo then went on to discuss the differences in political ideologies between the leftist liberals and the rightist conservatives. It suggested that neither ideology on its own was 100% correct, but a balance between the two would be best for society and for Google. The memo then identified Google as having a liberal bias. I mean, yeah. If you don't believe that, get out. Don't get out. Keep watching, but, I mean, come on. Damore's memo went on to discuss conclusions made in scientific studies and included hyperlinks to the studies that Damore referenced. The memo linked to the articles and studies from the Wiley Online Library, the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Quillette, the British Journal of Guidance and Counseling, and The Atlantic. These citations were provided for the purpose of identifying potential alternative bases for differential workplace patterns at Google, as compared to the sole reason that Google provided, namely hiring/employment bias. Google and certain employees and outsiders who eventually read this memo ignored these citations and later publicly attributed the conclusions drawn from these studies directly to Damore himself. It's a convenient thing to do when you're discussing things online, like on Twitter or in media sound bites, right? Is to ignore the long citation in the context of a statement and simply take it and run with it. After identifying possible non-bias causes for the so-called gender gap identified as an issue in the tech industry, Damore went on to suggest non-discriminatory ways of reducing the gender gap that did not involve the illegal racial and gender quotas and preferences that Google openly admits to having employed. Damore's memo then explained the harms of Google's current method of simply looking at an individual's race and or gender when deciding who to hire, as it effectively lowered the bar for underrepresented minorities and women and increased tensions between employees. Furthermore, Damore pointed out that Google's current method of increasing diversity resulted in what is known as reverse discrimination, because Caucasian and Asian males were not being selected for jobs and promotions due solely to their status as non-females or non-favored minorities. Damore ended his memo by addressing the problem in a constructive manner. Well, that's their perspective. By advocating that Google should treat employees and potential hires as individuals, not members of tribes. I will note that I'm recording this late in the evening, late at night, after Martin Luther King Day. So, there's that. I hope it's clear that I'm not saying that this is a quote from the memo. Hope it's clear that I'm not saying that diversity is bad, that Google or society is 100% fair, that we shouldn't try to correct for existing biases, or that minorities have the same experience as those in the majority. My larger point is that we have an intolerance for ideas and evidence that don't fit a certain ideology. I'm also not saying that we should restrict people to certain gender roles. I'm advocating for quite the opposite. Treat people as individuals, not just another member of their group. Tribalism. Assess people on their merits, the content of their character, not the color of their skin, or what particular plumbing apparati they may be utilizing. Damore also suggested more concrete steps that Google could take to remedy its problematic/illegal tribalist approach, including stopping the alienation of conservatives, recognizing the fact that Google has its own biases, and confronting those and having open and honest discussions. Being conservative or classic liberal in large corporations is automatically tough, because those positions don't play well in soundbite. They play well in longer things. Yeah, like let's say you're opposed to someone being forced to bake a cake for someone based on their sexual orientation, right? And you say, listen, I think someone should be able to refuse business to whoever they want. And the counter to that is, even this racial or protected class of some other sort. And you say, yes, but I don't think people should refuse business. I think they should be allowed to, and that the market will correct it, because we have tools to review and cover all of these things and get the word out that this is a discriminatory business and we should let the market shut it down. That doesn't play as well as, well, of course they should serve whoever walks in the door, right? But is it that simple? Is it ever that simple? And I think the honest answer is it's never that simple for anyone. Even Google, right, who clearly would suggest that, shouldn't we promote someone based on their merit? Well, no. Well, why not? Well, because we have this really nuanced reason why we want to hire a bunch of diversity hires and stuff like that. But because they're in an ideological echo chamber, as Damore suggests, then, they don't have the foil. They don't have the foil telling them maybe that isn't the correct way. Damore submitted the memo to Google HR using the feedback form provided by the Google presenters at the summit. So he literally provided feedback as requested, and maybe they didn't like it. I don't know. His memo is written entirely on Google's Google Docs system. The comment section of the memo is left open for other Google employees to leave their thoughts on the document from the day Damore drafted the document to the day Damore was terminated. This document was not hidden in any manner. Damore published multiple versions of the memo internally, each version altered after receiving solicited individual feedback from numerous Google employees, which is a lot more diligent than a lot of people, and I guess credit to him for doing that. Most people just write their thoughts down and let it go. On July 3rd, 2017, at the suggestion of a coworker, Damore posted the memo on a Google group discussion forum called Coffee Beans. Well, maybe that coworker wanted him fired. Coffee Beans was an internal Google forum used to discuss various issues at Google, such as workplace diversity. In parallel with the discussion group created in Coffee Beans, Damore emailed individuals responsible for Google's diversity programs. The Women at Google program, the Code of Conduct team, the Google HR, and Google HR. Damore also asked whether certain diversity programs that were aimed at helping individuals on the basis of their gender or race, such as, quote, Women Who Code, quote, Bold, an internship program offered only to women and underrepresented minorities, and Stretch, a class Google offers only to women, were legal, and asked how using someone's protected status, such as race and or gender, in making employment decisions was legal. Damore emailed the Google Code of Conduct team to state that he believed some of Google's policies were not being applied equally and were being violated. Code of Conduct team referred Damore to Google's HR for further action on his concerns. Damore's complaint about Google's illegal hiring and employment practice was never investigated or pursued by Google HR other than by firing him. That's a big statement. I mean, maybe Google did investigate it and they disagreed with him. We don't actually know. We won't know until Google makes their claim. And interestingly, this could force Google to release their demographic statistics, and that could be enlightening as well. The Women at Google group responded to Damore and stated that its goal was 50% representation of women at Google. On or about June 2017, Damore met with an individual from the Women at Google group named Monica. Her name is in quotes, so we don't know if that's a pseudonym or if he just got her first name and didn't get her last name. Don't know. To further discuss his memo and the organization's goals, Monica agreed that Damore had a valuable perspective and that he should share that perspective with the diversity teams, and she promised to connect Damore with such diversity teams, but she never did so, despite Damore's repeated request. On or about July 2017, after the Diversity and Inclusion Summit, Google held another diversity training class, and you're starting to see just how much money Google is putting towards diversity, and that could be either good or bad, depending on your perspective. Diversity training at its Mountain View headquarters. Damore attended this event based on his similar motivations for attending the summit, namely because Google factored, quote, diversity and inclusion into its employment advancement opportunities. The guy's looking to get promoted. The diversity training was broken into two parts. One, an online course, followed by two, an in-person training. Damore provided feedback in response to the online portion of the diversity training by asking whether Google accounted for political viewpoint bias in the workplace, since Google was addressing other biases. Google's only response was that Damore should attend the in-person training. At the in-person training entitled Bias Busting, Google discussed how biases against women exist in the workplace and how white male privilege exists in the workplace. Training was run by the Unbiasing group at Google, and there were approximately 20 Google employees present. And if you've ever been to an elimination of bias training, you know exactly how this feels, right? Unbiasing sure looks like biasing in a different direction. That's all I'm going to say on that. But, whatever. Damore disagreed with this one-sided approach. When Damore verbalized his dissent and his concerns at the one-sided presentation, other employees, including managers, laughed at him derisively. Poor Damore. They considered his viewpoints to be conservative and thus flawed and worthy of disparagement. Sometimes I like to, picture the way lawyers write as being the way real life happens. We consider your views to be conservative and thus flawed, worthy of disparagement. Me disparaged. Shame. For shame. And they may have, which is the saddest part to me. At the end of the diversity training, the presenters asked the audience members to submit any written feedback they may have to them. In response, Damore electronically submitted the memo he had drafted, which had been updated multiple times with comments and feedback from other Google employees. Once again to Google HR. The Google HR once again ignored Damore and did not respond to the memo in any way. On or about August 2nd, at the suggestion of a Google colleague, Damore submitted the edited memo to skeptics at google.com, another message board for Google employees only. Damore explicitly stated that the purpose of submitting the memo to the group was for Google employees to discuss different views and look at matters from a different perspective, including the conservative perspective. Otherwise, all Google employees would simply hear their same opinions regurgitated over and over again and never enrich their experiences with different viewpoints. Within the next few days after Damore published the memo on the Skeptics forum, the memo became more and more widely viewed on the private Google forums. I'm having to say Google too much. It's not okay. On or about August 4th, 2017, an unknown Google employee leaked the memo either to Vice Motherboard or Gizmodo. Well, which selectively quoted, not Gizmodo. They would never selectively quote and misrepresent something based on a pre-existing bias. Gizmodo doesn't do that. I don't believe it for a second. This news story, distorting Damore's internal memo on workplace issues, was picked up by other media outlets until Damore's memo went viral across the world. And this is confirmation bias at its heart, isn't it, folks? Like when you take one news story who misrepresents something and you just ignore it, and then you go ahead and continue the misrepresentation. Like, there you go, man. On August 4th, 2017, Damore attended a meeting with Rao, another representative from Google HR. At the meeting, Rao stated that Google was aware of Damore's memo. We're aware of your memo. And although Google could not ask him to take it down because it was protected political speech, they still thought it was in his best interest to do so. Well, I mean, at this point, we're not going to ask you to take it down, but we're going to suggest that maybe you should, right? Damore understood from this meeting that Google was threatening him with termination for his internal speech about workplace issues, including his critique on Google's gender and race quota programs and its dismissal of unpopular conservative political viewpoints. Damore received threats from his coworkers. After Damore's memo went viral outside of Google, Damore began receiving multiple threats and insults from his coworkers. Because that's what you do, right? When you're presented with something challenging to your ideals or ideas or biases, you immediately threaten and attack. That's how you engage in effective discourse. On August 3rd, 2017, which is a day before all of the shenanigans, George Sadlier, a director at Google, sent out a mass email condemning James's essay as, quote, repulsive and intellectually dishonest. I mean, you'd wonder if he read it, right? And promising an HR investigation into Damore. For what? Like, what HR investigation would you do based on someone publishing a memo? Like, I mean, what? I'm calm. Sadlier also promoted posts that advocated for physical violence against Damore. That seems good, right? Subsequently, on Friday, August 4th, Damore received a late-night email from Alex Hidalgo, a site reliability engineer at Google and Sadlier's organization, which stated, you're a misogynist and a terrible person. I will keep hounding you until one of us is fired. Fuck you. That's their words, not mine. Forwarded message. Oh, and there it is. They went ahead and... I don't like when people do this in complaints, when they provide inline citations or inline exhibits. Include it as an exhibit after everything and let us reference it. But, I think they wanted to do it for emphasis here. It's at least legible, which is nice, but I don't like when people do this. It bothers me. Hidalgo's email was another example of how Google's management team encouraged rank-and-file employees to attack other Googlers who express political viewpoints outside the company's very narrow views. And if Hidalgo's manager, who is this Sadlier guy, if he promoted and encouraged that, then, I mean, he absolutely did that. Damore forwarded Hidalgo's email to Google HR and was told to work from home for some time until emotions cooled down. No! Like, you don't say work from home. You say, we'll investigate the people who did this and you should maybe contact the police. Okay, whatever. This email is not a threat of physical violence. So I guess maybe he shouldn't contact the police on this one, but they've got it. You haul both of these guys into HR and you tell them knock it off. Not that Damore did anything, but I guess to be diplomatic, you let him face his accuser and you say, knock it off. We don't tolerate this nonsense. We don't tolerate threats of getting one or the other fired. If you keep it up, you're fired. That's how you deal with that. Similar threats followed from other coworkers. Google executives and employees condemned Damore, his memo, and his views. Some coworkers demanded Damore's termination, the termination of other individuals who shared his views. Right? Let's just go ahead and be the thought police. One good thing that could come out of the trash fire. This is a quote from someone's Google post. One good thing that could. This is Alon Altman. One good thing that could come out of the trash fire that is OMG/5932 is that several of the people who agree with the document have actively stated their support. Pretty much all of those Googlers are employed at will. If Google management cares enough about diversity and inclusion, they should, and I urge them to, send a clear message by not only terminating Mr. Damore, but also severely disciplining or terminating those who have expressed support. This will send a message that we have zero tolerance for intolerance. You idiot. I'm sorry, but internally defeating statements are that's the fruit of the idiot tree, isn't it? Like, we are intolerant of this intolerance. We're intolerant of this position of like. I will also like to take this opportunity to say, if Mr. Damore is not terminated by the end of this month, I plan to turn in my 2 weeks' notice. Peace out, buddy. Go away. And then there's a response, I guess. And I don't know if I'm guessing this Alon Altman maybe that's a woman. Okay, that could be. But imagine being the one woman in an 8-person team with him. She deserves a peer bonus for survival, because apparently he's dangerous to the literal well-being of this person. Damore was terminated on Monday, August 7th. 3 days after the publication of the thing. Why don't you work from home for a couple days? By the way, you're fired before you come back. At approximately 6 p.m., they made him work a full day. That's the worst. Via telephone. As he had been working from home that day pursuant to HR's instruction following the Alex Hidalgo threat of August 4th. Damore received a call from Rao, who was joined by Wu. After exchanging pleasantries, Damore informed Rao and Wu that he had filed a complaint that morning with the National Labor Relations Board due to defendant's prohibition of his engagement in a protected, concerted activity, which is discussing workplace conditions with his coworkers. Rao and Wu did not respond to this point. And why would they, right? Like, that's a legal claim. HR, they're probably smart not responding, frankly. Wu told Damore he was being terminated for, quote, perpetuating gender stereotypes. Rao then stated this was Google's final decision. Google apostrophe, they're missing an S there. Final decision. When Damore attempted to explain why his termination was unlawful, Rao stated that there would be no discussion. Okay. During the call when they terminated Damore, neither Wu nor Rao identified any Google policy or procedure that Damore had violated. And again, not being familiar with California employment law, although it being California, I find it hard to believe that this is an okay thing, but we'll see. We'll see in the causes of action section what makes for wrongful termination if they meet the standard. Google employees were awarded bonuses for arguing against Damore's views. Not only did Google terminate Damore for his political views relating to workplace issues, but they then rewarded individuals who disagreed with and disparaged Damore. The Google recognition team allowed employees to give fellow employees peer bonuses for arguing against Damore's political viewpoints. Peer bonuses were typically reserved for outstanding work performance or for going above and beyond an employee's job duties. Defending the liberal agenda or defending violations of California employment law is not in any of Google employees' job description. In one example of this, an employee gave a peer bonus to another employee and stated that the bonus was for, quote, speaking up for googly values. I mean, are these children? And promoting brackets diversity and inclusion in the wretched hive of scum and villainy, because these people, right, these people at Google can't get through an email without quoting Star Wars, as if the nerd stereotype wasn't already present. That is Damore's memo. The Google recognition team reviewed this justification, considered it appropriate, and allowed the bonus to proceed. Congratulations, Simone Wu. Simone Wu. So here's the email. Congratulations, Simone Wu. You did something so amazing that Matthew Sachs awarded you a peer bonus. Here's what Matthew Sachs had to say. Simone has been doing a fantastic job speaking up for Googley values and promoting D&I in the wretched hive of scum and villainy that is G/PC harmful discuss through posts like, presumably, Damore's memo. It can be very draining to stand up in the face of persistent recalcitrance. Persistent recalcitrance from filing one memo and saying, hey, let's just talk about these ideas. I'm indebted to Simone for keeping at it, and I hope that her example serves as an inspiration to others who can share the burden. Let me guess, Matthew Sachs is a white male looking for promotion in a world that doesn't want to promote him, right? Visit your award history page to see your certificate to print and properly hang on your cube, wall, fridge, robot, etc. Be sure to thank Matthew Sachs either in person or by email and let them know how much you appreciate the award. To learn more about the peer bonus program, blah, blah, blah. And then she responds to Matthew, thanks, Matthew, I appreciate the kind feedback, although I'm trying to spend less energy on this stuff, smiley face. Get bent. It's just... okay. On August 5th, 2017, Colm Buckley, a high-ranking SRE director, stated his intention to stifle political dissent within Google. Here's Colm Buckley's post. You know, there's certain, quote, alternative views, including different political views, end quote, which I do not want people to feel safe or share here. To share here. My tolerance ends at my friend's terror. You can believe that women or minorities are unqualified all you like. Pretty sure, by the way, that Damore doesn't say that anywhere in the memo. I can't stop you, but if you say it out loud, then you deserve what's coming to you. Right, because we wouldn't want people to say their opinions. Yes, this is silencing. I intend to silence these views. They are violently offensive. The emphasis is not mine. It's this dolt, Colm Buckley's emphasis. Take your false equivalents and your fake symmetry and shove them hard up where the sun doesn't shine. I mean, again, like, imagine the comedy of meeting these people in the real world. Good Lord. All right. That's the Damore factual statement. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop here. We're on page 16 of the complaint, and it's right at the beginning of the Goodman statement. And let me just see here. I mean, the problem is this is a fairly decently drafted document, and there's a lot to it, and I don't want to jump into the Damore or the Goodman claims, right? Because they go all the way through page 51, or not really. I mean, not just his claims, but the cause of action start on page 52. So we're at page 16. I think. Was it 16? Holy Lord. Let's go through Goodman. Let's go through it. I'm going to make an executive decision over all of my detractors. And we'll go through Goodman, and we'll get to the next section on the class victims. And then we'll probably stop there, because I think that's around page 30, and that's a good place to go. Goodman first began working for Google in around October 8th, 2013, till his termination on or around December 5th, 2016. So he's terminated, 7 months, 8 months before Damore. Goodman was a conservative, a Caucasian, and a male at Google. Well, I mean, hang it up, buddy. And was discriminated against and harassed as a result. Goodman was ultimately terminated for these protected characteristics. And they are protected. Whiteness is still protected under the same as other races under the law. Whether it is in social media, Whether it is in public opinion, it doesn't matter. Under the law, under the 14th Amendment, we're all guaranteed equal protection. And so you don't get to decide that whiteness doesn't get protection in the same way that blackness or any other ethnic determination would. It just doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. The derailed document. On or about August 20th, 2015, Kim Burchett, an L7 SWE manager, I don't know what that is, drafted and published a document on a Google employees-only website entitled Derailing. This document discussed how individuals might attempt to silence someone's opinions or distract from someone's point of view. The document was aimed at Caucasian males and conflated marginalization with white male privilege. The document essentially claimed through examples that any response but agreement to a statement about bias, prejudice, or privilege was a derailment. So again, reductio ad absurdum. The thesis of this document is that on one particular set of topics, the left-wing political frame of systematic bias must always dominate, and the receiver must accept that frame and its associated worldview in their response. So, reductio ad absurdum, if you don't know, means reducing an argument to the point of absurdity. It is a rhetorical tactic. It is, a way that you address an argument by saying, if we carry this all the way to the point where it gets ridiculous, which it inevitably will if unchecked, right? Like, that's the idea of reductio ad absurdum, is that at its core, it will get to this point. Reductio ad absurdum, if you say that we permit white discrimination because whites are in the majority, and we take that reductio ad absurdum, we would say that eventually it would be legal to enslave whites based on the shifting public opinion simply because they're in the majority. And so long as they're in the majority, enslavement is proper if we allow discrimination. Like, that's the idea of how you would conduct a reductio ad absurdum statement, okay? Just if you don't know. Goodman read this article and disagreed with its premise, as did many other employees. Right? Like, saying that you can't, that merely asking a question about your presupposition or your suppositional statement is derailment is nonsense. Like, it's the opposite of derailment. Derailment would be dismissing a statement based on a presupposition. Goodman left a comment stating his belief that men, quote, need to understand that Caucasian males are the victims of a racist, sexist political movement, and it's not their fault. And it isn't, right? Just like it's not a black person's fault for being born black, it is not a white person's fault for being born white. We're all the product of our upbringings for some in some things, but I'm not a determinist. Some people are determinists, but either way, even if you're a determinist, we're a product of our decisions and how we treat other people. And if you don't treat other people in a poor manner, then you're not discriminatory just by the color of your skin. Of course, I say that as a white male, so my opinion is invalid, I suppose. Goodman went on to state that, quote, the point of this document is to disallow any defense at all that a man might take when some woman complains about bias. There is no defense. The woman is always right. The man has no alternative but to submit to her superior moral position. We have a word for that attitude. It's called sexism. And it's absolutely true. Because again, if you replace man and woman, if you swap man and woman in this statement, it becomes obviously offensive on its face. If we say the point of this document is to disallow any defense at all that a woman might make when some man complains about bias, there is no defense. The man is always right. The woman has no alternative but to submit to her his superior moral position. We have a word for that attitude. It's called sexism. Absolutely. That's the A-B test I was talking about earlier, and I know that A-B is the wrong phrase, but it's if you just swap the two genders in this case, the statement becomes overtly sexist. So it was overtly sexist at the onset. After Goodman's comments, others responded stating that he was misinterpreting the document, to which Goodman responded, quote, well, if that's the point, then you could be clearer, because all I'm getting from this document is that when anyone claims bias, there's no possible defense, not even the defense that the bias did not exist. He then provided a helpful suggestion to assuage any similar concerns other Caucasian men might have, right? Like, this is the internal monologue of someone arguing on Facebook. You can just imagine it, right? Maybe a section on what a man should do when a woman accuses him of bias in order to protect himself from a system that is highly biased against him, right? Like, I'm going to offer this helpful suggestion, and in reality, like, that's a relatively, it shouldn't be, but it is a relatively inflammatory sentence, and it's funny to say. Like, you could hear the wheels grinding if you've ever argued on Facebook. I'm going to helpfully suggest that this person goes to hell. Goodman's comments were not well received, no kidding, by other supposedly open-minded Googlers. Googlers. Goodman even further stated in another comment, quote, I started out intending to change minds by explaining logically and rationally. Well, there's your first choice, your first problem, buddy. What is offensive about this document? In response, I was treated dismissively. Logical and rational arguments don't win on any social media platform. They really don't. Like, you may convert one or two people, but I mean, largely you're not dealing with it. They're in a bias echo chamber, and you know it. Goodman compared this document to that which, quote, slave owners would have written for their slaves to help them understand how to interact with their masters. Goodman has never uttered a hyperbolic statement in his life. I bet this guy's fun to get a drink with, though, in order to point out prejudices involved with the document. Burchett, instead of applying the constructive criticism, I mean, I'm sure he intended it constructively, but there's no way this person would take that constructively. And potentially helping other employees who felt similarly discriminated against like Goodman did, stated she was, quote, resolving this comment, also escalating to management. And that's just the coward's move. Like, whatever your perspective on this, like, how dare you? And she's proving her own point, right? This is derailment. Yeah, and it's such derailment that I'm not even going to engage your ideas. I'm going to report you. How dare you derail me? Ironically, other Google employees begin to derail Goodman's point of view under the guise of advocating for open dialogue. Burchett merely reported Googlers that disagreed with the thesis of her document, as Goodman did. They disagreed with me. Let me call management to help. To Google management as being ungoogly. Oh, God. You know, you read articles about how great Google is to work for, but if you read ungoogly, I mean, if I had to say that over and over, it might end it all. This further exemplifies the one-sided and flawed mindset of Google that anyone that disagrees with you is wrong and hateful. And it does. Like, if this is true, then it does. Google punishment Goodman for his views on racism and discrimination. I bet they did. After being reported to Google HR spoke with Goodman in around September 2015 regarding his post. Google HR discussed Goodman's viewpoints on race and or gender equality and his political viewpoints. I bet that went swimmingly. Google HR chastised him for attempting to stand up for Caucasian males and his conservative views. At the end of the HR meeting, Goodman was issued a verbal warning. Can you imagine? Like, I wish I could have been in the meeting, because can you imagine the dude who wrote those comments on Google's forums, like making a defense of Caucasian males and thinking that anything other than "you're a racist pile of garbage" was going to be their viewpoint? Goodman complained to his colleagues about the lack of fairness that conservatives received at Google and the leeway Google provided for liberals to express their thoughts and opinions without repercussions. After the 2016 presidential election, many employees at Google began to panic. Can you imagine? It's like, okay, y'all, I worked at Thrivent Financial in the call center, not on the phones, but next to them, when the 2008 financial crisis happened. And I can only imagine a place like Google melting down over the Trump election in far worse fashion than the market crash of 2008. Having expected a different outcome fully in line with their political views. Hillary didn't win. And for the next 6 months, they all published internal posts stating how Bernie could still take it. That was a joke. That's not that's not in the document if you're just listening to this. Sorry. I'm just joyously picturing overtly liberal workplaces melting down as Trump gets elected. And not again. For you guys who don't know, I'm not a Trump supporter in any way, but the cosmic irony, or not even irony, the comedic picture that's painted in like the woe betide us. Because I listened to a couple liberal podcasts and stuff like that, and I mean, the way they treated that election, like the world was ending the next day. Oh, it was good. On November 10th, 2016, in response to many Google employees posting a different Google-wide forums regarding their fears about the new administration, Goodman wrote that anyone, quote, who believes President Trump will be out to get minorities, women, or gays has absorbed a lot of serious lies from their echo chamber. Like, this guy did not get the memo when he got that verbal warning, I guess. Continuing the quote, and the echo chamber is entirely one-sided. You can't watch TV or go to the movies without being constantly confronted with the leftist worldview. Leftists can go their whole lives never being exposed to conservative worldview, except in shows written by people hostile to it. He's not wrong, but he's not diplomatic either. And I get the impression of a man fed up with his situation. Goodman also stated in response to another Google employee that, quote, if you truly think that Trump is anything like a Nazi or ISIS, or wants to hurt gays, women, or the disabled, then you are so badly out of touch it borders on delusional. If you don't truly believe those things, but are saying them anyway, then shame on you for trying to stir up fear and hatred. There you go, I guess. Google terminates Goodman. Didn't take long either. Oh, boy. On November 9th, a few days after President Trump was elected as president, Sarmad Gilani, I don't know how to pronounce that name, a Google employee posted the following message on a Dory thread, an internal forum where Google employees can ask questions that other Google employees can respond to. Quote, as someone already targeted by the FBI, including for work for being a Muslim, I'm worried for my personal safety and liberty. Will Google take a public stand to defend minorities and use its influence, or just issue the usual politically nuanced statements about our values? That's a fair question, right? And I'm sympathetic. Like certain demographics in response to comments made by Trump absolutely have a right to question the administration and the policies coming from the administration, and to question their employers. Google is a massively powerful machine, right? There's no question that Google is one of the most powerful entities on the planet, rivaling several governments. Certainly, almost any government short of the United States is rivaled in power by Google. This is a fair question, right? Trump said some statements that would obviously be troubling if read sympathetically to Muslims, Hispanics, Native Mexicans, stuff like that. So it's fine. This is a fine question. But let's see what Goodman said. Goodman responded skeptically to Gilani's claim that he was targeted solely due to his religion by asking, quote, in the administration of the most pro-Muslim president in history, you were targeted for just being a Muslim? Why didn't you file a civil rights suit? The Justice Department would take your side if it really happened. Now, I don't know if Obama was the most pro-Muslim president in history. I don't actually know that. Maybe. Reagan had a lot of pro-Muslim tendencies, if you were the right stripe of Muslim, right? He brings up an interesting point, like what's the difference going from Obama to Trump? And Obama, Obama outright killed lots of Muslims with drones and missiles and bombs. No problem doing it. So just remember that. If you think he was the messianic answer to your prayers, that guy was a bombing and missiling fiend. Other Google employees immediately misinterpreted Goodman's post and responded by stating, Quote, if it really happened, come on, David, let's give our coworkers the benefit of the doubt here and not suggest they're lying. Yeah, and that is a misinterpretation, right? He's not saying if it really happened, if your plight really happened. He's saying that if you filed a civil rights suit, the Justice Department would take your side if it happened. There's no comma there. That's not a separate clause. It shocks me that people at Google don't understand basic English. Picture it didn't happen isn't a very constructive comment here. He's not saying it didn't happen. He's saying if you filed a suit, the Justice Department would take your side if it happened. After they reviewed the factual analysis, the Justice Department would be on your side. Reminds me of, quote, why didn't you report sexual harassment to the police argument? Pfft, but that's a good argument. Like, if you got sexually harassed, report it to the police. I'm not saying that you didn't get sexually harassed because you didn't report it, but guys, let me help you here as an attorney. And this is not legal advice. This is just personal advice. If a crime has been committed against you, report it to the police. Even if they don't do anything, that report may be integral in a civil suit later when you say that, listen, at the time, I felt harassed. The evidence of my harassment is in the fact that I contacted the police. They took my statement and they purported to look into it or said, if I had any other trouble to give them a call. Here's an official record of what I did. So you're not just taking my stupid word for it. You're taking theirs. Sorry. Digression. If you believe you are wronged lawfully, report it to the police. You may need that document in evidence in a civil trial or a criminal trial at a later date. And if it happens in Minnesota, call me. Goodman attempted to explain that he was not suggesting that Jelani was lying and firmly stated that he, quote, would not suggest Jelani was lying without specific knowledge of the case. And he wasn't. Obviously, if you take any objective English read of that sentence, you'd know he was not suggesting he was lying. You have to presuppose the lie and then apply the statement to it. Goodman further stated that at the suggestion by another Googler, he searched Jelani's story being profiled and found, quote, zero evidence for the claim that Jelani was targeted just for being a Muslim. Goodman posted more specific questions about the FBI's motives for looking into Jelani, such as the fact that Jelani had recently visited Pakistan. The FBI could have possibly found something interesting about Jelani's trip or the region he visited. In response to Goodman's legitimate questions, a fellow Google employee became hostile and stated that she had to escalate this thread, meaning that she reported it to Google HR. David, I had to escalate this thread, FYI. It's not okay to create conspiracy theories about your coworkers. Did he? I mean, I don't know that he did that. About your coworkers might be linked to terrorist organizations. Apparently, no one at Google knows English. You're disrespecting individual rights by generating conspiracy on topics you probably have no context. That's not even a sentence. What's next? Will I be a criminal or linked to terrorist groups for visiting Turkey? I mean, maybe. You might be a criminal or linked to terrorist groups for visiting Turkey. It depends on what you did there and what statements you've made online to support, your support of ISIS if you have it. Sorry, but my family still lives there to protect your *** from more radical terrorism and acting as a buffer. So probably not going to be a criminal for visiting Turkey. This isn't a hard question. You are criminalizing everyone who has worked harder in Middle East so you can sleep better tonight. Nope. That's not what he did at all, but that's interesting. Goodman had another conversation with another Google employee on November 10th, 2016, where he complained about being a conservative and a Trump supporter. Goodman pointed out that, quote, Trump supporters are a hated and despised minority at Google. I don't doubt this for a moment. Googlers feel comfortable slandering them in a public forum and assume there will be no consequences. And that's probably true because not just Googlers, everybody feels fine slandering Trump supporters in a public forum and slandering Trump in a public forum. And it's, again, as a person who did not and does not support President Trump, it's rather offensive to see the media take. And by the way, if you want Trump to get reelected, keep right on up. the way you're going is going to just give him a platform to show how he was unfairly represented, when you could just fairly represent him and probably defeat him. But keep up. I mean, who knows? It's interesting, at least. Goodman's comment was met with anger and accusations of him, quote, gaslighting instead of having genuine concerns. Gaslighting is one of those derailment tactics that was discussed earlier. On or about December 5th, 2016, Google HR reached out to Goodman to discuss his comments, including those surrounding Gilani's post. Gilani? Google HR stated that Goodman had accused Gilani of terrorism based on Gilani's religion, and this was unacceptable. He absolutely did not. I mean, we don't have the quotes, right? What I read was a paraphrase of what he said. So, who knows? Maybe those quotes will come out and they're really horrendously damaging to Goodman and they'll be funny. Either way. As a result of Goodman's, quote, accusations, Google stated that he was being terminated. Google attempted to simply question the logic behind a coworker's story of victimization on the basis of his race and religion, but because of his political affiliations, Goodman was retaliated against and fired. That's a legal conclusion. Google employees were not allowed to discuss or to question the diversity narrative of the company, even to the point of questioning politically charged factual assertions by fellow employees who prove their own political agendas. So this is an exchange from Tim Chevalier. We don't have a problem with divisiveness. We have a problem with racism here at Google and in the population at large. Then Goodman replies, Tim, it's easy for you to say when you aren't the hated, despised minority. Just read the comments on these Dory questions. Trump supporters are a hated and despised minority at Google. Googlers feel comfortable slandering them in public forum and assume there will be no consequences. Tim Chevalier. David, I'm transsexual. Mike Pence tried to enact legislation to force kids just like me when I was a kid to undergo conversion therapy, e.g. electroshock therapy, to make them cis. I have a uterus. Mike Pence put a woman in jail for having a miscarriage. All right. His policies... Oh, so this must be a male to female trans. Okay. His policies include women being forced to hold funerals for their miscarriages. I have chronic health conditions. Donald Trump wants to make it impossible for me to get health care if I start a business or become a freelancer. Like, does he? Don't you dare gaslight me by telling me that I'm not in a hated and despised minority the week the voting populace of my country declared war on me. But not the voting populace of Google and not the voting populace of California. Certainly not. California, and I imagine that the location in California where this person is located was largely in support of them. I think that that's probably not true. And if you think that Trump won on the transgender issue, like that was the reason, transgender, transsexual, I don't want to use the wrong term here, right? If you think that was the thrust of Trump's campaign and that he won based on that and that everyone voting for him has any issue with transsexuals, you're horrifically misguided. Horrifically. But, whatever. These interactions showed that the culture at Google was severe enough that employees such as Goodman were bullied into silence and required to tolerate harassment without pushing back. Yet Google's management refused to consider their concerns to be valid or even worthy of investigation. All right, I am actually going to stop with the document here. We're at page 21, the bottom, potential class members. And in the next video, which will probably be released in the next day or two, I will go through the next 30 pages or so until we get the causes of action. Let's see. Here's what's interesting about this complaint so far. This complaint has not made very many legal conclusions. Like, they've said unlawfully terminated a couple times. That's true. That is true. But what they have done is they've established a factual basis that people were discriminated against at least based on their political viewpoints. At least based on their political viewpoints. They have established some facts that would suggest that they're based on their that they were terminated based on their gender or race. Some facts. Not the best case on gender and race, but this isn't about winning, right? This is about surviving summary judgment and surviving that dismissal motion that's going to come from Google. Okay. I think that so far they're doing a good job in laying out a set of facts that leads to a dispute of facts. And that's what the key is. It's a chess move, right? It's not necessarily saying we win based on these allegations. It's saying that this narrative is going to be different enough from Google's narrative in the important ways to make this survive that summary judgment and dismissal and get us to discovery and get us on the stand and get us getting depositions and witnesses to come out and say that Google did wrong. Okay? That's the trick here. And I think they're doing a good job of that. They're showing over and over, they're laying out a narrative that these guys were terminated for this. Now, Google has an interesting choice here. Google can say, we agree with everything they said. They can absolutely say that. They may be within California law or within at least the court's understanding of California law. These are white males. If the idea of a protected class exists in California law, which it absolutely does in the Human Rights Act, white males are the least likely to be protected by that class, even if it on its face says that gender and race are protected aspects of a protected class. Being white and male may not be how the law is actually enforced on those protections. Those protections may have been intended and may have been adjudicated in favor of ethnic minorities and women rather than men. And if that's the case, even if the face of the law states that they win, if the application of the law states that they lose, Google may have an argument to say, we want to dismiss. We agree with everything they said. Yep, we absolutely fired them for these statements stating their political views and on the basis that they were white and male. We want to go ahead and fire them for that because they were not helping our goals of meeting diversity quotas that we keep internally and help sway our hiring decisions, but don't work to the detriment, or do work to the detriment of Caucasians. It doesn't matter. If they agree with everything and the law is on their side, they win. Hands down. So maybe they do. Depends on their read of case law. And like I said, when we get into the cause of actions, I'm going to get into the case law a lot more. A lot more detail is coming there. But the other opportunity is to say, no, we did not fire James Damore based on his memo. We fired him based on these other statements or other actions or other things that he did. Those are material, factual disagreements, and they will help them survive summary judgment because it can't be taken as true. If James Damore says, I was fired for these reasons, and Google says, no, you were fired for these reasons, these other reasons, then that is a statement of disagreement on a material fact relevant to the cause of action. And at that point, you go through to trial. So this document, as far as I can see so far, is well drafted. It's strategically drafted to get through and survive the early dismissal and summary judgment that's coming from Google. That typically comes in most civil cases, right? They're trying to outdo that bit. And if they last past that, this goes on for a long time, costs Google a bunch of money. Settlement offers may come because it may be cheaper to settle with them for a large sum of money. We'll see. But I think based on this being a class action lawsuit and Damore bringing in Goodman and registering the class, he's probably out for some blood at Google and blood in the media. Not just winning some sort of settlement and going away quietly. He wants this in the media. He wants this in the news. He wants to impact the narrative of the nation, as far as I can tell. I don't know. I might be wrong. But that's what it looks like to me. And he's doing a good job of doing that with this lawsuit because as the news covers it, if Google files a motion to dismiss and it survives, this is going to be in the news cycle for at least the next 12 months, if not the next 24 months, as these things come out. And it should be pretty high profile. But yeah, so anyway, if you're a new viewer, thanks for coming to the channel and checking us out. If you're an old viewer, I always appreciate the watches and views and whatever. Please drop all sorts of comments. Call me an idiot, call me a genius, whatever you want in the comments. I'll interact with you as best I can. I love to interact in the comments. If you think this video is going to be interesting to anybody else, please share it. And note that I am available on Google Play and on the Apple Podcast Store under Lawsplaining, Lawsplaining, Lawsplaining. If you search for that, you'll find me. And all of my videos do go on there usually the next day, because I record them late and upload them late, so then I have to get up in the morning and convert them and upload them. But they do go on there, so you can listen on there. But please share this around if you think it'll be interesting, and please come back for the next video, because as we get into the classes, it'll be interesting. But really, once we get into the causes of action especially, I'll be bringing out a lot of the relevant law, existing case law, and the and the statutes themselves, and we'll go through them, and we'll check on the merits. And when Google responds, trust me, that response should be fiery, because they're going to be pissed based on this. They don't want this kind of press. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I hope you had a good night. Hope you enjoyed the channel. If there's something that I can do better or different, please let me know in the comments. Also, check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/lawsplaining. It'll be down in the... there will be links to all my junk down in the description. Check it out. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.